there, everyone, and welcome into the Gridiron Guesser and our top takeaways from Week 3 of the college football season. Thanks to all of our new subscribers, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and jump on board with us here at the Gridiron Guesser. We're glad to have you here, so let's go ahead and get started as we look at our top takeaways from Week 3 in college football. Number 1. Well, the Gridiron Guesser went 1-4 against the spread in our picks for Week 3. No excuses. We f***ing sucked. Our formula failed us. Penn State did to Illinois what we thought they would do, but the rest of the games just did not turn out. Minnesota's defense did next to nothing to stop Drake May, and the Gopher offense is even worse than we thought. Oregon State pretty much dominated San Diego State for 4 quarters, but the Beavers never really got going on offense, which led to a lackluster win and a failed cover. Kansas State had their opportunities to put away Missouri, and they failed to do so, which led to an outright loss on a record 61-yard field goal by Missouri as time expired. And Tennessee? Wow. We knew before the season a little too much had been put into Joe Milton, but damn, Tennessee looked awful Saturday night in the Swamp. Credit Florida. They took this rivalry to heart, and they played above their heads. We went against the money numbers on this one, and it f***ing screwed us here. Sometimes you go with your gut, and that's just pretty much a stab in the dark. So where does the Gridiron Guesser go from here? Well, we're going to do what every big-timer does when they get knocked down. We're going to get up, we're going to adjust our formula, and we're going to bet even more big games this coming weekend. And there's not a better time to do it than Week 4 with so many huge games to pick. So we're right back on the horse, and we're ready for a huge weekend, and we're going to have 11 money picks for you come this Friday. Number 2. Are there any serious title contenders out there? The SEC looks very down. Texas struggled against Wyoming. Florida State escaped Boston College. And we really don't know much about Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State in the Big Ten. And are we really believers in a Pac-12 out west, a conference that has really struggled to put teams in the college football playoff since its inception? So far, Washington looks really good. They stomped Michigan State. USC looks like we thought they would look. Oregon, Oregon State, UCLA, and Utah have all done what they're supposed to do to this point in the season. Could the Pac-12 really be the conference that puts 2 teams in the playoff this year? The Gridiron Guesser thinks so, and this is the perfect year for it to happen. It's still early, and there's lots of football left to be played, but the Pac-12 is playing the best football right now and has a real path for 2 teams to make the playoff. Number 3. What's up with Alabama? The quarterback situation at Alabama is no doubt causing problems for the Crimson Tide and Nick Saban. Alabama looked average at best on Saturday in their win over a very bad South Florida team 17-3. The Tide still didn't find a quarterback, and much of the team seemed to be simply going through the motions. Both Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson showed us little reason to give them another chance at starting this season. So where does Saban go from here? It appears Milroe is the only option left, and he does give them the best chance to win, although it's probably not very good by Alabama standards. This week's game against Ole Miss is going to define the remainder of the season for the Tide. If the Tide can find a way to win, everything remains in place. But if they lose, look for the wheels to come flying off this wagon very quickly. Number 4. What should we make of the performances by Florida State and Georgia? The Seminoles and Bulldogs had a few hiccups this weekend in their games with Boston College and South Carolina, respectively. Florida State was finally able to pull away 31-10 before the Eagles mounted a ferocious comeback that fell 2 points short. Georgia fell behind 14-3 before scoring the final 21 points of the game in a dominating second-half performance over the Gamecocks. Florida State may very well have been caught looking ahead to Clemson once the game seemed out of reach, while the Bulldogs needed a wake-up call at halftime to turn on the motors and blow past South Carolina. Both of these teams will be fine. Florida State is still a very good team with ACC and national title aspirations, and Georgia is still our frontrunner to win the SEC East and look for a possible three-peat. These types of games happen. It's college football. Be happy your team won and move on to the next week. Number 5. How good or how bad is the Big 12? So, Texas struggles with Wyoming. It was 10-10 through 3 quarters. Kansas survived woeful Nevada. Kansas State lost to Missouri. Cincinnati lost to Miami of Ohio. Iowa State lost to Ohio. and Oklahoma State got absolutely pummeled by South Alabama at home. Not to mention Texas Tech and Baylor both lost their first 2 games of the season before rebounding over cupcakes this week. Now, to be fair, Oklahoma did curb stomp Tulsa, West Virginia beat Pitt, and BYU beat Arkansas, although that was more of a Arkansas probably beat themselves type of game there. There's no doubt that Texas probably had a little Alabama hangover and will be just fine. But is there anyone in this conference that's going to be good enough to compete with Texas? Is Oklahoma good enough to beat the Longhorns? We'll know soon enough as they play in the Red River rivalry in just 3 weeks. As for now, the Big 12 looks like a few teams at the top and a whole bunch of average to bad teams filling up the rest of the conference. We'll give you one unknown that no one seems to be talking about right now, and that's UCF. They're quietly 3-0 and travel to Kansas State this weekend in a game that the Wildcats will come out ready to make amends for their loss to Missouri. If UCF can get a win here, look out for Gus Malzahn and the Golden Knights. Number 6. The SEC is wide open. No, not just the West, the whole conference. Georgia is still the front runner in the East, but there's no doubt with how Florida played against Tennessee that the Gators have the talent to put together a run. The Volunteers looked bad against the Gators, and they may not be the team that many predicted after losing quarterback Hendon Hooker from last season's team. Kentucky as well, they're 3-0 and start conference play this week against Vanderbilt. Did South Carolina possibly expose some of the Bulldogs' weaknesses this year? Maybe, but it's really not a secret that Georgia's still trying to work out the kinks with a new quarterback. We expect the Bulldogs to continue to get better, which is a bad sign for the SEC East. But if the Gators can find the same level of play they had for the Vols throughout the season, Florida could be in the hunt. And don't count out the Wildcats either. They get the Gators and Bulldogs back-to-back over the next few weeks, so we should have a good idea of how the SEC race is shaping out come mid-October. Over in the West, LSU seems to have rebounded well from their Week 1 loss to Florida State as they have dismantled their last 2 opponents by a combined score of 113-24, with that last victim being the SEC rival Mississippi State. Jaden Daniels looked outstanding against Mississippi State, and LSU is starting to look like the team predicted by most to win the SEC West. Alabama, honestly, they just don't look all that great right now. Arkansas, well, they continue to lose games they should win. Texas A&M got torched in their only real test so far this season against Miami. And then there's Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Could this be the year that Ole Miss finally breaks through and gets to the SEC championship game in Atlanta? Ole Miss didn't really look that great for most of the game against Georgia Tech, and the week before struggled to get by Tulane, even though Tulane was without their star quarterback. But none of that's going to matter now, because the Rebels travel to Alabama this week. If the Rebels win, Ole Miss has taken a huge step in the right direction, although they must face LSU the very next week. LSU, on the other hand, they have Arkansas at home this week, then they would travel to Oxford to face the Rebels that next week. The SEC West race is still very murky right now, but it's going to clear up pretty quickly over the next couple of weeks. Number 7. Week 4 will set the path for the season. Florida State at Clemson, Colorado at Oregon, UCLA at Utah, Ole Miss at Alabama, Oregon State at Washington State, Ohio State at Notre Dame, Iowa at Penn State. Are you f***ing kidding me? What a huge weekend of games. And that's not even all the huge games from this weekend. Make no mistake about it. Week 4 will help us determine which teams are really in the hunt for conference titles and possibly spots in the college football playoff. So many questions will be answered this weekend. Does Ohio State have a quarterback in Kyle McCord? Is Notre Dame for real with Sam Hartman leading the team? Can Penn State and Drew Allaire find more consistent offense against a very strong Iowa defense? Is this the beginning for Ole Miss and the start of the end for Alabama? Is Florida State ready to take back the crown as the premier ACC team from Clemson? Is Colorado really to be taken serious, or have they just beaten some very average teams? And what about the rest of the Pac-12? We haven't even talked about Washington State, who host Oregon State this week. The Cougars have looked great so far this season and could put their name in the Pac-12 mix with a win over the Beavers. Week 4 is huge for college football, and here at the Gridiron Guesser, we're working overtime to make sure we have the very best picks this week. We're going to be picking 11 games this week. That's right, 11 games. That's right, it's time to put up or shut the up after last week's miserable 1-4 record against the spread. And the Gridiron Guesser is about to knock the out of some of these picks in week 4. So if you haven't yet, subscribe, like this video, and make sure to turn on those notifications so you don't miss our picks this Friday. We'll have 11 of the best picks out there for week 4 of college football. This is going to be an outstanding week. We can't wait to be back on Friday with our 11 picks that are going to help you be a for sure winner. Thanks for watching the Gridiron Guesser. We can't wait to see you next time.